Hi everyone, welcome to our webinar today. The topic for this webinar is Energy Storage for Rural Affordable Housing, the McKnight Lane Redevelopment Project. We have two excellent guest speakers with us today, and we also have with us our host for this webinar, Todd Olinsky-Paul. Todd is a project director with Clean Energy Group and the Clean Energy States Alliance. These two organizations are hosting this webinar today. So before I pass it over to Todd and our speakers, I'd like to go over a few quick housekeeping notes. All of our attendees for this webinar are in listen-only mode. You have a couple of options to join the audio portion of this webinar. You can either listen in using your computer mic and speakers, which is the default option when you log in, or you can select telephone and you'll get some call-in information to listen via phone. If you'd like to minimize the webinar console so that you can see this display full screen, you can click on the little orange arrow that we have circled there in that picture. You can also click on that to expand the control panel again. A very important note, we ask that you please submit your questions as you think of them throughout the webinar, and we will get to as many questions as we can. We're going to save some time for Q&A. We'll be reading your questions as they come in, and we encourage you not to wait until the very end to type your question in. We expect to have a lot of people on the line today, so we should get a lot of questions, and make sure that we get to yours by typing it in soon. A final note, this webinar is being recorded. We will be posting a copy of this webinar recording on our website at resilient-power.org and also at cisa.org. And we'll also send you a follow-up email within about 24 hours with a link to the webinar recording and to a PDF of the webinar slides. So with that, I would like to pass this over to our host for this webinar, Todd Olinsky-Paul. Todd?
Great. Thanks very much, Samantha. Welcome everyone to the webinar. This is Todd Olinsky-Paul with Clean Energy States Alliance and Clean Energy Group. I'm going to do a very brief introduction to who we are and what we do, and then I'm going to pass the microphone over to our two presenters to discuss the McKnight Lane Redevelopment Project. And I'll give a little bit of background about that project as well. But first, if you're joining us for the first time, Clean Energy States Alliance is a nonprofit. We're located in Vermont, and we are essentially a membership organization of state clean energy funds, and you can see on the slide here a number of their logos represented. And we help them with all sorts of clean energy policy and programs, and interact with them as well as with federal organizations like DOE and the national labs. So that's who we are. This particular project, the McKnight Lane project, was supported by our STAP program. STAP is the Energy Storage Technology Advancement Partnership. It's a project that is run under a contract that we have with Sandia National Laboratories, supported by U.S. DOE Office of Electricity. And STAP is basically a program that joins federal and state and municipal and local resources to promote energy storage project deployment. And as you can see from the map, we've worked on projects all over the country as well as supporting state policy development through the STAP program. We also have something called the Resilient Power Project, which is a project of the Clean Energy Group, the sister nonprofit to CISA. Resilient Power Project focuses on smaller behind-the-meter energy storage linked with solar, specifically for resilient power, which is backup to critical loads during grid outages, and also for cost savings to customers. The Resilient Power Project is supported primarily through foundation grants, and you can see a number of those foundations represented on the slide here. By contrast, STAP tends to focus on larger energy storage projects. In this case, we had brought the resources of both the Resilient Power Project and STAP to bear to support the McKnight Lane redevelopment, and you'll hear a little bit more about that later. The Resilient Power Project in addition to supporting behind-the-meter energy storage deployment, also does a lot of analysis and writing. And you can see some of our recent reports here. There are many more available. They're all free on our website, resilient-power.org. We also, through STAP and the Resilient Power Project, produce a lot of these webinars. They're all recorded and archived. And so now at this point we have several years worth of archived webinars that are available to view. I want to say a little bit about this project that we're going to be talking about today before I introduce today's speakers. This is almost a year into the McKnight Lane project. When I say that, what I mean is that it's been nearly a year since the units were occupied, and so we're checking in. We had a previous webinar on this project when it was being developed, and so now we're checking in to see how the batteries are working, both individually and in tandem with Green Mountain Power. Craig Ferreira from Green Mountain Power is going to address that. And also we're checking in to see what the tenant experiences have been, and just to get a recap of what went into this project. It's a very unusual project. I believe at the time it was the first ever project that put solar and storage into individual affordable housing units in a rural area. These are very high efficiency units. They're rental units. The addition of the energy storage to these units did not increase any costs for the tenants, but it does provide them with a resilient power benefit. In other words, if the grid goes down, they should be able to continue to run all their critical loads without interference, and that would include things like heat, air conditioning, refrigeration, lights, and so forth. The project is also set up to benefit Green Mountain Power in that the utility can draw on these batteries during times of regional peak demand to reduce its own costs, and Craig will go into that a little bit more, how that works and what the benefits have been. So that's what we're discussing. I'm going to give brief introductions of our panelists, and then I'll turn this over to Peter. Peter Schneider is a senior consultant at the Vermont Energy Investment Corporation in Burlington, Vermont. He provides technical support to builders, architects, engineers, affordable housing agencies, and homeowners participating in a number of different programs, including Efficiency Vermont Certified High Performance Homes, LEED for Homes, and Mid-Rise and Passive House. His goal is to help his clients design and construct more energy efficient, healthy, durable, and sustainable buildings, and I should note that he worked quite closely with the Vermont company constructing the modulars that you're going to hear about in this presentation. He is a certified energy rater, passive house consultant, and LEED for Homes Quality Assurance designee, and his current focus is running the state's mobile home replacement program, and that certainly covers part of the purpose of this project, because these were this project was a mobile home replacement. We're also going to hear from Craig Ferreira at Green Mountain Power. He's part of the Energy Innovation Development team there. He holds a BS in Business Administration and an MS in Environmental Science, and is committed to researching and developing programs and product offerings that transform the way GMP interacts with customers in order to save them money. And I should note also that GMP is among the first utilities in the nation to offer a behind-the-meter customer energy storage program, and we'll hear a little bit more about that from Craig. He's also devoted to creating a smarter grid while fostering a change in the traditional electric utility model to one that is greener and sustainable over a long term. So those are our presenters, and with that, I'm going to hand the presentation over to Peter Schneider.
Great, thanks, Todd. Peter Schneider, and I'm with Vermont Energy Investment Corporation, and we're a nonprofit. Bulk of our work is administering a few energy efficiency utilities. We're based out of Ohio with Efficiency Smart, District of Columbia with their sustainable energy utility, and this project I'm going to focus on here came under work I do under Efficiency Vermont, which is Vermont's energy efficiency utility. And as Todd noted, this was part of our mobile home replacement program. So what I'm going to cover is just a little background on this project and get into some post-occupancy data on the actual performance of these homes, and then I'll hand it off to Craig so he can speak more to the experience with the solar plus storage system. So there are a lot of partners that need to come together to pull off a project like this. A lot of innovations came together here. Not only the storage aspect of this, which was really unique in a rural setting in collaboration with Green Mountain Power, but you know, replacing manufactured housing with more durable and sustainable modular housing, and also achieving zero energy, or at least setting out to achieve zero energy. And I'll get into some of the data to date in regards to our performance of these homes. But you can see this was a close collaboration amongst all the partners on this slide here. We had Cathedral Square, who's the developer, affordable housing developer, Addison County Community Trust. They own and manage this. And we have a lot of funders, as you can see here, and folks who brought technical support to the table. Sonnen, the battery provider, Pilmaharam Architects did all the design work. So just a really great collaboration, and without all these partners, you know, really can't achieve this type of project. So the real foundation for this project was, you know, sustainable, healthy homes, and in this case, these are low-income rental units. What we're delivering is a locally made modular home that is all electric. It incorporates a lot of conservation measures, such as real high levels of insulation, triple glazed windows, air tightness. We bring the loads down to a point where we can meet all the heating, cooling demands with all electric heat pump based systems. We also put as much importance on the health of the building, so not only durability measures, moisture management, but also looking at fresh air ventilation, and then we also meet the Indoor Air Plus standard, EPA standard, for healthy materials, no VOC paints and adhesives, making sure that all of our finishes are free of urea formaldehyde, for instance, and making sure that day one when these homeowners move in, they're in a home with a real healthy environment that leads to better health outcomes in the long run. The other thing that we're trying to do is, you know, instead of perpetuating poverty with a depreciating asset, which over time manufactured housing that sits on a trailer has shown, we're hoping to incorporate housing over time that will appreciate as an asset, and or at least hold its value. And that's an important aspect. This is low-income rental, but we do a lot of home ownership with this same model. So here we are in Waltham, Vermont, or northern Vermont. Pretty severe climate. Today, I think we might break a record for the hottest day here historically on this day in September, but we also see very cold, frigid days as well. So heating and cooling demand, though primarily heating, really drives the design of our buildings here. And particularly in this case, we're looking to reduce the loads as much as we can, so we can rely on point source heating and significantly reduce energy usage. So this is how we get there with these specific homes. They come in all different shapes and sizes, and I'll show you. But basically, as I noted, the conservation measures, we then factor in real efficient HVAC and hot water systems with cold climate heat pumps. In this case, it's a Mitsubishi wall-mounted unit. We just have one unit in the main living space. We couple that with a fresh air ventilation system called the SERV by Build Equinox, and that's called that stands for the Conditioning Energy Recovery Ventilator. That's actually a energy recovery ventilator, a balanced ventilation system that also offers some heating and cooling, but overall the goal is to manage indoor air quality to keep it as close to healthy outdoor air as we can under full occupancy. And then we have heat pump water heater, and then we top it off with, on every one of these homes in McKnight Lane, we have a 6,000 watt PV system on the roof tied to a Sonnen. In this case, it's an Echo 6 battery system. Here's a little aerial view, what the existing mobile home park looked like from the road down to the river. You see there's 13 units left there. We recycled all of those units. This is sort of what it looked like when we first partnered with Addison County Community Trust. They purchased this property. We had to do a lot of remediation in this community to remove tainted soils and then remove hazardous waste from the houses and then recycle them. And during that process, we were designing these duplexes, which you can see here. Here's an example of a couple of different two-bedroom schemes. These are 14 feet wide by 70 feet long. These are two family units, and so we have 7 of these duplexes that we have on this site that replace the 14 individual homes. This is a 3D rendering of what it looks like from the street, and then down below is an actual picture of the units completed. All these homes participate in Efficiency Vermont's what's called Efficiency Vermont Certified High Performance Program. This is a net zero energy ready standard where we're really trying to bring loads down. As I described, you can see the home energy rating index here for each of these units was around 1. They varied a little bit based on where they were in the configuration and size of the home. So really good performance. You know, 1 being as close to zero energy as you can. As you get up to 100, you're getting towards code level. Here's a solar system. We have a rubber membrane roof, some really unique fastening and racking systems for this solar, but pretty straightforward system. This is installed in the factory. The homes are delivered complete to the site, and so actually the modules are installed on site, but all the racking, all the wiring, they're solar ready when they arrive at the site, and in a matter of a couple hours they install all those modules. And then we have the battery unit. So this is sitting either in the mechanical room or just outside the mechanical room as shown in this picture here. This is the Sonnen Echo unit. And so overall performance, what you see here is January through August. We wanted to just work with full occupancy here in the community. So late last year we had full occupancy and we pulled data through this August. So in the blue you can see the gross consumption there. In the orange is the sum of net consumption, which would be the sum of the gross minus the actual gross generation, so the PV production, which is the little green dot. So you can see pretty much across all the homes over the 9 months, we're producing around 4,000 kilowatt hours. We're using over that in some of the houses, a little bit under in some, and right around the same amount in some. So there's some variation. There are other things that were going on in some of the higher using houses, you know, that were sort of outside of our control and also outside of the modeling in regards to some additional electrical loads that are needed in those residences. But this is also the first year of occupancy. I think that there's some optimization that can be done, some homeowner behavior that we could assist in improving the actual performance of these homes and helping them utilize the systems a little bit better. But overall, you know, we are not at zero energy with this community, but when you factor in the way our net metering structure is in the state of Vermont, you can see here there's a PV adder for each kilowatt hour produced in this community. Every tenant in this community just has a single rental fee each month. They're not paying for energy costs. That's included in their rent. So Addison County Community Trust covers the energy costs, and for them, over this 9-month period, you can see that the average cost has been $20 for the net cost to Addison County Community Trust, which is great. It's about $15 just for the service fee. So, you know, averaging around $5 in regards to energy costs per unit per month, which is pretty good when factoring in the production and the PV adder. We're looking at load distribution here, so we have a few units where we're actually looking at circuit level monitoring so we can really break down where the energy usage is. This is just an example, but we're able to look at this with several units and begin to pin down where the energy is being used and where there may be some opportunities to either optimize these homes here or guide future design to reduce energy consumption. Indoor air quality. So, you know, energy efficiency is great, but the non-energy benefits from our standpoint are critical as well. You know, we want to make sure that we're bringing a really healthy and comfortable home to these, in this case, tenants. And what you can see here are the VOC, volatile organic compound levels. And this is over the year in one of our units as an example, where we can look at the frequency of the air quality at different parts per million. Now, there have been a number of studies that have shown that once you get to 800 parts per million of VOC or CO2 levels, that we begin to see impacts to cognitive functioning. So we really want to try to stay below that. The EPA's recommended level to which not exceed or try to stay below as much as possible would be 1,000 parts per million. And you can see here that, you know, we're providing really optimal air quality throughout the year, as most of the VOC levels are below that 1,000 parts per million over the whole year of data here. So we can also pinpoint down and look at minute by minute data over periods of weeks, and for instance in the winter and when the home's occupied, and we're still seeing great performance with regards to indoor air quality. Here's master bedrooms. Just give you an idea, over all of January of 2007 as an example, in one of the homes where we have localized monitoring in individual rooms where, you know, we're not exceeding that 1,000 parts per million, which is really important in regards to improving folks' health outcomes, particularly those with, you know, respiratory issues. And then we're fortunate enough to be working with the SERV system through Build Equinox. They have a wonderful monitoring system and dashboard where we can, you know, it automatically is analyzing a lot of the data coming back to that unit in regards to carbon dioxide levels, VOC levels, and we can really pinpoint how these homes are performing with regards to, for example, here, pollutant exposure time, and you can see the little black dot in the bottom corner. We really are doing a great job in regards to indoor air quality, which is a critical piece. So this is one project, 14 units, and you know, we've really been happy with the performance so far. The tenants have been really happy. What's unique about this in contrast to other affordable housing projects is we're putting these folks really in their own home, and you know, they're really feeling like it's their home. It has a very different feel than an apartment. They're also excited about the performance of their home, so they're aware. They're looking at the display on the Sonnen battery on a daily basis. They're looking at their dashboard for their ventilation system, and we've just received great feedback. A couple of power outages that were related to some actual on-site issues where folks didn't even know that the batteries had kicked into backup mode and only realized it after they tried to use a non-critical load, such as a washing machine or dryer, for instance. And they've just been really happy. So we're hoping to replicate this. This is a future development in Randolph, Vermont that we're working on right now, 22 units. You can see the different aesthetic, different designs, a lot of flexibility with modular, but this will be a very similar, very high performance homes. A mixture of low-income home ownership and rental, solar plus storage. And so this is a home that we just delivered, just to give you an idea of the flexibility. This is a small cottage home fit on a 14 by 35 foot allowable footprint in an existing 120 unit mobile home park. This is actually a model home right now, open for tours daily in Burlington, Vermont. We're hoping to see more homes like this. This has a loft on the second floor that you can access for additional storage, and has been really well received, you know, by this community. And because of the way parks were developed over time, there are a lot of small lots, and going up to 1.5 stories or even 2 stories is a good way to utilize these spaces better to provide family housing. So look forward to your questions, and I guess I'll pass this along to Craig now to get more into the storage aspect. So thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Peter. I just wanted to mention before Craig begins his presentation that we will be saving a significant amount of time at the end for questions and discussion. We have a bunch of questions already. Please go ahead and type those in as they occur to you, and we will do our best to sort through those and get to as many as we can. So thanks very much. Peter, Craig, you're up.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for your time today. I'm Craig Ferreira from Green Mountain Power. I'm happy to talk about this project. It's been an exciting one for us. So one of the things, some of the things I'd like to talk about today are going to be the energy storage benefits for the tenants at McKnight Lane. I'll also talk about the benefits to Green Mountain Power and the rest of our customers. And then I'll talk about specific lessons learned and some of the issues that have popped up as part of this pilot. And then lastly, as Todd alluded to at the beginning, GMP is offering a more broad residential energy storage pilot that I'll just go through briefly. So as Peter described, the whole unit, all the units are entirely electric, which is really great. You can see here in this table what we are currently backing up using the batteries. So really it's their main needs. So heating and cooling. We've got the serve air recovery system being backed up, refrigerator, and then some circuits for lights and other plugs. So the total load, an average of 3 hours, is under 5 kilowatt hours, which is really great because the units we're using are the Sonnen Eco 6 units in most of them, and then we've got a couple Sonnen Eco 8s. The Eco 6s are basically a 6 kilowatt hour battery, which would provide over 3 hours worth of backup in a grid outage scenario. And the Sonnen Eco 8s are a 8 kilowatt hour battery, which would provide almost 5 hours worth of backup in an outage. This is really great news because GMP's average outage is around 2 hours. So in almost all cases, these tenants will ride through an outage and really be totally fine with the loads that are in their home, and they generally should not notice much is happening. So key for comfort and key for reliability during any grid outages. Fortunately for Green Mountain Power and our track record, we have not had any actual grid outages since these units were installed. So hooray for Green Mountain Power, but not so great in putting these batteries to a test. So because of that, I worked with one of the tenants to kind of simulate an outage in her home. We did that by cutting power at the meter remotely. And we did that for a duration of 2 hours. So from 11 o'clock to 1 o'clock, we basically knocked power out at the meter and let the battery do its thing. So you can see in the chart here, the orange line is what the house is using during that 2 hour period. And the green line is what the battery is discharging during that same period. So you've seen that I've kind of blown up that 2 hour section. And the two lines mirror each other perfectly, which is exactly what we want to see happen. We want the batteries to be matching what the house is consuming, which proves that it's doing exactly what it's designed to do. So everything worked perfectly, and once we connected the meter back up and restored power, it flipped back to grid power, and all was well. So success, and we're hoping that in the event of actual grid outages, these batteries perform as this one did, which is exactly why we have done this for this project. So the main values for Green Mountain Power with residential energy storage is to reduce our peaks during an annual event that we have and then a monthly event that we have. So that's really the primary driving force for our involvement in this project. So once a year we have a ISO New England peak where Vermont's share of the total demand, it drives our costs for that year. So it's 1 hour of that one day for that 1 year. Unfortunately, GMP did not predict that it was going to be June 13th this year. So we were unable to use the batteries for that annual peak. The silver lining there is that our total overall load is less this year than it was last year, so costs will still go down. It would have been nice to use the batteries to drive it down a little bit further. But June is one of the earliest peaks we have ever seen, so it was a bit of a surprise for us. And then our monthly peaks, you can see since we've got the batteries under our control 5 months ago, or 6 months ago at this point, we've been able to hit our peaks 4 out of the past 5 times, which is really great. One of the reasons for not being able to hit it in April is because in those shoulder months, there's very little load that fluctuates too much. There's probably not a lot of any, or if any, cooling happening, and not as much heating happening during those months. So Vermont's load shape is relatively flat, which makes it a bit more difficult to predict. But you've seen since then we've hit it every time. And I should say, based on the heat wave that we've had this past week or so, it is possible that we have not actually hit our annual peak and that one of these days we'll do it, but from what I'm being told, that is unlikely. But it's possible, and we're crossing our fingers that we've hit it this month. So I just wanted to give you an example of what a peak event looks like from our perspective. So when we're shooting for peak, we generally pick a window of 2 to 3 hours. In this case, on our June 12th peak for the month, we used a 2-hour window from 7 to 9 p.m. And basically what we're doing is telling the batteries to dispatch at their max capacity for those 2 hours. So for the Sonon Eco 6s, we're telling them to dispatch at 3 kW for a period of 2 hours. And the Eco 8s, we're telling them to do 4 kW for the same period. So you can see the dark blue line is the battery power. So you kind of see that it's hovering around 0 for most of the day, which really means that it's just sitting there idling, waiting for something to happen, whether an outage or an event. So at 7 o'clock, you can see that it spikes straight down, which is an aggregate demand reduction of all the units. So you can see that it drops down to about negative 45 kW, and it stays right around there for that 2-hour duration, and then right around 9 o'clock it hops back up to 0, which shows that for effectively for that 2-hour window, we're reducing our overall peak by 45 kW, and only one of those hours actually counts as our peak, but we've effectively done exactly what we had hoped. We leave the batteries at around 0 for a couple hours once the event is over, just to make sure that if we did miss estimating the peak hour, that we're not creating a coincident peak, and adding to our demand after that. So we leave it there for a couple hours, then you can see towards the tail end of that graph, the batteries will start charging back up and get ready for an outage or another event the next day. So what this means financially is, in aggregate, the batteries provided about $400 worth of value in June, which is great, and that's what we're shooting for. Maybe a little bit more with full capacity of all 14 batteries, but basically we're doing exactly what we wanted to in this chart and most of the months that we've hit our peak. So there's a few other values that energy storage can provide for a utility, and energy arbitrage is one of them. And it's something that GMP is working with our distributed energy resource management partner, Virtual Peaker, to develop a platform, or I guess build into his platform, the ability to do energy arbitrage. Energy arbitrage is, in a basic form, charging the batteries when market prices are cheap, and discharging the batteries when prices are expensive. So basically what we're doing is trying to more effectively use our resources in the field to drive down our costs and be more effective for our customers. So what you see in this chart is basically a prototype, early rendering of a simulation we've done for this purpose. The upper graph shows the day ahead and the real-time pricing of the New England ISO market. And the chart below shows what we are doing with the batteries at the times of different pricing. So again, the goal is to discharge the batteries when prices are high and charge the batteries when prices are low, just to be more effective in the way we are using and purchasing energy. A couple additional benefits that are a bit more difficult to quantify, which is why we do pilots like this, so we can learn and gather data and work towards that so we can understand what it means for future projects. You can see in the graph here, or excuse me, the map here, the red section, which is highlighting an area of our grid that is really constrained by high penetration of solar installations. And I've blown it out again here to show that McKnight Lane is kind of right in the middle of that red section. So it's a really perfect opportunity for us to put in some energy storage to help soak up some extra excess solar in the area, which kind of leads into the next value of T&D deferral. So by soaking up that extra energy, it's possible that we can defer or maybe even eliminate some upgrades of equipment. So rather than install new poles and wires or upgrade transformers and substations, it's possible for us to use energy storage to alleviate the same types of issues. But what storage has the added benefit of is unlocking some additional value streams, which will really greatly benefit not only the folks in the area and the people who have the energy storage, like the folks at McKnight Lane, but all the rest of our customers, because we've been able to avoid just adding costs to our system. So what did we learn in this pilot? So there's a few things that we've learned. So one is to expect the unexpected. Going into any project or pilot, it'd be really great if we simply hit a home run and everything worked perfectly, but that's not the case in almost every case. So we have to be ready for things to go wrong, whether it's software related, hardware related. We have to be able to just expect that something is going to not go the way we had planned and be able to be flexible enough to work with it and figure out a way to move forward and move on from it. So a couple of the issues that we had were early on the software implementation for actually controlling the batteries and getting them in place to a point where we can actually use them for our peak demands. It took a bit longer than expected, mainly because of communication access and the response to our commands were not working as we had anticipated them working. We also had some hardware issues. We had one bad inverter and one bad battery cell that needs to be replaced. That happens. So we've taken care of those and moved on. Excuse me. The largest struggle we've had to date are the modems and the smart functions within the Sonnen units. They have had to be, they're spotty and they've had to been reset manually. Peter has played an instrumental role in making sure those are operating. It has a very high touch on a lot of these units, so thank you, Peter, for that. But we are working with Sonnen to develop new hardware to replace all of these, and we're hoping to roll those out soon so that we can basically fortify our communications with the units and not have these ongoing issues. Another lesson we've learned is that communication is definitely key to any project. So GMP definitely wants to pick partners that are high touch, high communication, making sure that we are understanding of all the issues and current situations of anything going on. So communication is crucial for us, and we want to make sure we continue to work with partners that will provide us that key communication. And then finally, being on the leading edge of technology has both risks and rewards. We knew that this was one of the first of its kind type of project in the country, which is really exciting for us. Green Mountain Power loves to be on the leading edge of technology and trying new things, especially when it transforms the way we do business and drives down our costs for our customers. But we have to recognize that there are risks involved, and things aren't always going to go as we planned. But again, we like to stay flexible and work with it and get to a point where we are comfortable and making everything successful for everybody. And finally, I just want to touch upon a broader residential storage pilot for our customers. A lot of people probably already know or have heard that Green Mountain Power has partnered with Tesla to provide our Powerwall 2 Powerwall 2 program to our customers. So customers can get into the Powerwall for $15 a month for 10 years, or a $1,500 upfront charge, which would come with agreement that GMP has access to the battery for 10 years. We're able to get these costs down in a similar fashion by using the same value streams that we've used in this McKnight Lane project. So basically, peak shaving is the largest one. And then there are a couple other markets that we're going to be using the Powerwalls for to help drive down the cost to $15 a month, or that $1,500 one-time charge. The Tesla Powerwall 2s are a 13.5 kilowatt-hour battery. They provide 5 kilowatts of continuous power through the integrated inverter. They can be installed outdoors, but generally not going to be seen too often in Vermont just because it can get so cold here. We've had really great customer interest without any real marketing, just one press release. We've had somewhere between 1,300 and 1,500 customers sign up to move forward with the Powerwall. That doesn't mean that all of those customers will actually get a Powerwall. They have just signed up to move forward in the process, to be contacted further, to set up a site survey, basically learn more information and make sure that the Powerwall is the right fit for them. We have not installed any, though we are on the verge of installing the first several. We have some customers just waiting for scheduling to be done to pick a date, and then we have a lot of others right in the pipeline right behind them that'll be ready to go. So we're hoping for a successful program here. But this is open to all of our residential customers, so if anybody is interested in learning more or is interested in signing up for a Powerwall, you can visit greenmountainpower.com. And there's a link right on the homepage there to get into the Powerwall. You'll find plenty more information about the program there. Thank you, everybody, for your time. Again, I am Craig Ferreira from Green Mountain Power. I just want to mention that Virtual Peaker is our distributed energy resource management platform. They're a great partner for us, making this whole thing possible from the standpoint of accessing the batteries and using them for peak shaving. Their website and contact information is below, and I know they'd be more than happy if anybody wants to reach out and learn more about their role in this project and their other capabilities. So thank you, everybody.
All right, thank you, Craig and Peter, and we're going to keep you on the line. We have a bunch of questions queued up, so that's great, and looks like we've got some time. So folks can continue to send in questions if you'd like, but we do have a bunch already. If you could, Samantha, go back to the slide that Craig had showing the simulated outage. There was a chart there because there was a question about some details about that chart. So let me start with a sort of general question about the technology. I know that this is something that's been on people's minds because of recent hurricanes, flooding and wind damage and grid outages in Florida, Texas, the islands, and so forth. And so we have several questions about how these systems would withstand high wind in the case of the solar and flooding in the case of the batteries. Now, I've been on site several times. I know that this site, you couldn't tell from the aerial image, but it's quite a bit upgrade from the river. I don't think there's really any too much danger of flooding, but at least in theory, if you guys can address the solar and the batteries and how they would respond to a storm, for example.
This is Craig. I can respond to the batteries, and I'll let Peter speak more to the solar arrays on the roof. So flooding is not something we've contemplated as a serious issue here. So I'm not exactly sure how to answer that question. I would imagine if water gets into these cabinets, the batteries will short out and cease to work. They are protected by a cabinet. I'm not sure whether or not they are watertight, but that's definitely something we could check into and get back to whoever asked that question.
Yeah, so this is Peter. The Zero Energy Modular Initiative and this product, came out of Hurricane Irene that came through Vermont and had a real disproportionate impact on our mobile homes and mobile home parks. Some of that was associated with where these houses are sited in a 100-year floodplain. Others were just the fact that the homes are not well installed and anchored to their site. The wind loading characteristics on a lot of those homes, even built today, is not great and certainly can't withstand some of the winds we have been seeing and have seen in the past. So what I'd say in regards to our initiative is we don't put any homes in the 100-year floodplain. So this project's a perfect example where we're well out of the 100-year floodplain. You really couldn't tell from the aerial view or that street shot that I had, but there's quite a slope to this site. You know, the lower home and even the river is well below the lowest home and is well out of the 100-year floodplain. So that's important. But with regards to resiliency, you know, that was one of the big goals of this product, the zero energy modular product, but also this whole concept with the solar plus storage. So the solar's installed. I don't know the exact wind rating on the solar, but the homes and the solar are installed to resist high wind events. And in regards to, you know, flooding, there's not much you can do about flooding. We just try to site our homes on permanent frost-protected foundations that are well up above grade. Typically will be 12 inches above grade with either a pier installation or a full crawl space / 8-inch foundation. Everything in Vermont needs to be frost protected, so we're well below 4 feet with our footings in any application. So yeah, you know, we have power outages here, as you said, as Craig said. We haven't had any here, and actually I think the average power outage in Green Mountain Power territory is 2 hours, so we don't typically see real long power outages in GMP territory, but some of our smaller utilities and that have older infrastructure and are further out in even more rural locations, we're seeing more power outages and longer power outages. So the goal would be that you know, we would have this backup power, and that even under a severe weather event, that solar would withstand it. Our homes are up out of the floodplain, so we wouldn't have flooding issues, and these folks could you know, carry through indefinitely with the sun shining, having their critical loads.
Okay, thank you. The question on this chart here, it's one that occurred to me as well, is what is that spike in the battery activity about 12:30? Is that the battery charging, or is that just some kind of a blip or something?
Oh, yeah, that's correct. The battery is charging at that point. So after it's discharged, you know, it's depleted to a certain point, and that spike you see is the battery charging itself back up for a few minutes.
Okay, great. Now we have another question that has to do with this particular this outage scenario. Person wants to know if the batteries are discharged during the peak hour in the evening and therefore unable to recharge using PV until the next day, how would this affect the customer should a grid outage occur during the night? So I guess to unpack that a little bit, first of all, do the peaks come? When do the peaks come? Is there enough time later in the day after the peak for the battery to recharge before the sun goes down? And then the second piece is what's left in the battery after you do that discharge to try to shave that peak?
Sure. So Green Mountain Power's peaks are generally later in the evening. You know, we're most often shooting around the 7 to 9, 6 to 8 time frame. They do occur earlier sometimes. So most of the time that is actually, it can be when the sun is already down. So to answer the kind of a piecemeal question here is, what happens if the customer, if we've dispatched a battery for our peak event and then there's a customer outage without any energy in the battery? So we're doing a couple things. One is that the batteries are never depleted lower than 10% of their capacity, so there is always some reserve in the tank for the customer. And the second is we are actively looking at weather events and weather patterns. So if there was a storm expected to roll through that we would consider a possible outage in this location, we would not dispatch the battery for our peaks. We would leave it there for the customer. We can't guarantee that it's always going to be successful. You know, there's a chance that we deplete the battery for our peaks and then somebody hits a telephone pole or a squirrel chews through a wire or something out of our control and out of our ability to predict that leaves the customer without backup. Those cases are going to be very, very rare, but it's definitely a risk that we're aware of. If there is no solar, if the sun's not out anymore, how the battery is recharging, The batteries can recharge from either solar or the grid. So in the case of the event that I showed, our peak event that I showed in one of the earlier charts, that 11 p.m. time frame, obviously there's no sun out then. It's actually recharging from the grid. So that's how they keep topped off. Ideally, they stay topped off from the free energy of the sun, but when the grid needs to pick up any slack, it will do so.
Okay, great. What is and we're going to try to shoot through a few of these quickly to get in more answers here in the last 10 minutes. What's the expected lifespan of the storage units?
Sure. The expected lifespan, or I should say the warranty period, is 10 years, 10,000 cycles. That is a lot more cycles than we plan on putting on the battery. So theoretically, they could last for a lot longer than that. With a new technology, it'll remain to be seen, how long they actually last, but they are warranted for 10 years, so that's at least what we're going to get out of them.
Great. Somebody wants to know, does GMP dispatch batteries individually or as an aggregated storage asset?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have the ability to do both, but we do dispatch these batteries in aggregate. So using our virtual peaker platform and that chart that I showed you, that was an aggregate load of all the batteries being dispatched at one time.
Okay. We have a few people asking whether the customers are sharing benefits of cost reductions and how those benefits get distributed between GMP, the customers at large, and the particular customer at this site. So if you could maybe sort of explain what how everyone is sharing in the benefits.
Sure. So this is a unique project for Green Mountain Power. So for the customers on site, there's no cost to them for the battery banks to be put in place. So they have reliability just as a natural part of this project. So they're benefiting from that. Then the rest of our customers, basically any peak reduction and other value streams that we're getting out of the batteries are going towards the purchase of the batteries, basically capital cost recovery, and then additional value is flowing back to the rest of our customers in the form of reduced costs and hopefully reduced rates. In the case of our Powerwall pilot, it's similar, where we are buying down the cost of the battery with those values. So that $15 a month for the Powerwall is the remaining portion of the battery that we need customers to be paying to cover the full cost of the battery. So there's a chunk of that, the buy down of the battery, that goes directly to that customer that's participating, and another chunk that is dispersed to the rest of our customers to lower our costs and again hopefully lower rates, or at least keep them low.
Okay, and I should just emphasize that GMP did contribute toward the purchase price of these batteries, as did several other partners in the project, and that contribution was calculated based on GMP's anticipated cost savings. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So the utility, in other words, made a contribution to the project. Well, several, both toward the purchase price and also, of course, in terms of labor and time and so forth, to make this project possible, and obviously is sharing in the benefits, but so are the ratepayers when the overall costs are reduced, and obviously the tenants here are getting resiliency benefits. We're talking about costs and benefits, and we have several questions about what's the cost of the batteries, what was the cost of the overall solar and storage system, and what's the cost of the units and so forth. If you guys could speak to those.
Yeah, this is Craig from Green Mountain Power again. I would refer anybody asking about pricing to contact Sonnen. We as utility, I think, probably get a little bit of a price break just based on volume. So I'd rather not discuss that, and I would just point somebody towards Sonnen to discuss with them pricing.
Yeah, and this is Peter. You know, with regards to the solar installation, as we're installing those solar systems, it's new construction. We're also installing the solar in the factory, that is all of the wiring and the racking, and as part of the build process. So in this case, the manufacturer Vermont is able to install that solar. Joe, it's under you know, something like $2.30 a watt. So you know, with those 6,000 watt systems, it's a much, and it's also on like a 212 pitch roof, you know, about 9-degree pitch roof, rubber membrane, pretty innovative installation approach that's less expensive than some alternatives. So from that standpoint, we're able to provide a lower price per watt than you would get typically in an install, even new construction. So that's about what it is on the solar side.
Okay, thank you. Somebody wants to know whether GMP owns any large-scale solar and storage systems. That seems like a good opportunity to talk for a moment about the Stafford Hills project, which we were also fortunate enough to be involved in. So, Craig, maybe you just want to briefly describe that.
Sure. Yeah, Todd, you probably know more about that project than I do. I wasn't too heavily involved, but Green Mountain Power does have, I think, the first of its kind in the nation, basically a large solar field on a landfill here in Rutland, Vermont. It is 2 megawatts of solar and 4 megawatts of battery storage, both lead acid and lithium ion, 2 megawatts of each. So yeah, it's our first microgrid project. It's got 3 of our Rutland circuits isolated on that whole system. So in the event of another Hurricane Irene or Tropical Storm Irene event happening, we're able to isolate those 3 circuits, turn the high school into basically a shelter that's got full power from the system, and just keep the area up and running as we need to.
Great, and I should probably mention that that project was in part supported by the Vermont Department of Public Service through a grant, a joint grant with U.S. DOE Office of Electricity at Sandia National Laboratories and Energy States Alliance also playing a role there. On the McKnight Lane system, there's a question about whether the batteries are programmed for peak shaving, demand management, energy arbitrage, et cetera. So I guess that means, are you manually dispatching these, or do you have some kind of automated system?
Yeah, right now it is a manual process, and I am the guy pulling the strings. So I'm working with our power supply group, who basically tells me when the events are and what hours to shoot for, and I go in and program the batteries to do what we want them to do. So right now it's the peak shaving is manual. Energy arbitrage will be automated through algorithms, and eventually we'd like to get to a point where peak shaving is also automated. We're just not at that point yet.
Great. There are a couple of questions here about why there are some, higher energy usage patterns on some of the units, and obviously it's going to come down to what people are plugging in and how they're using it. But somebody wants to know, if you have thoughts on that and what types of behavior optimization, could be available or might be required in order to get future projects like this to come in, sort of where you.
Yeah, good question. So people bring in freezers and plug those in to their bedrooms. So there are some additional appliances, some medical devices. Those are things that, are allowable, and we won't change. We encourage if people are going to bring in, for example, a chest freezer that's energy efficient, but if it's oxygen, and you've got a fairly energy intensive compressor running nonstop 24/7, that's a different issue, and that's just a requirement, and that could lead to higher energy usage. In regards to optimizing the systems that are there, we do have, everybody has different needs. We do have some higher occupancy units, and so you have higher hot water demand, just higher overall plug uses. Sometimes that leads to a little smaller conditioning on the heating side, as you've got a bunch of folks giving off BTUs walking around, but that's sometimes additional cooling that offsets that. So in regards to optimization, and I should say I spend a good deal of time there with the tenants, whether it's going and troubleshooting some battery things or other items, but this is just a conversation with those occupants, and some of it is data that we have on circuit level data where we can really look at, is there anything atypical with regards to uses there. Some of it's just optimizing the heating and cooling, not having your windows open in the winter and having the heating set to 80 degrees. There are some simple things that could be incorporated. Folks are coming into this type of housing often from very poor housing situations where, for instance, they don't have ventilation systems, and having a window open in the winter is the only way they think they could have fresh air. But when you incorporate a fresh air ventilation system and you're really controlling and optimizing indoor air quality, sometimes it's just having that conversation a few times, maybe even sharing some post-occupancy data with them to prove that they don't need to have the window open. So I think that there's a number of different opportunities to bring down some of those higher users. And, we're hoping that we could see everybody come in, right around, because we have that PV adder. The PV system is designed to produce a little bit less than would be anticipated used on an annual basis, because we're getting the, around 5 cents per kilowatt hour that goes towards that electricity bill and the usage, and anything that you don't use is you forego at the end of the year. It doesn't roll over, and so we just sort of sized it accordingly. So we don't anticipate seeing as much production as usage, but very close to it. So we hope to level off some of those higher users and see, basically our net consumption closer to our gross consumption.
Okay. Well, thanks very much to both of you. I think it's been a very informative webinar. I'm sorry that we didn't get to every question. We got to as many as we could. To those of you who are interested in reviewing, yes, this has been recorded and will be posted on our website. You can see the website addresses here on the screen, along with all our other webinars. They are available to view in full with both audio and video portions, or to download slides. So thanks everyone for coming. Thanks again to our presenters. And I'm going to turn this over to Samantha for any last words.
Thanks, Todd, and thank you, Peter and Craig, and everyone who joined us for this webinar. As Todd mentioned, there are some links on your screen where you can find out more information and find more resources from Clean Energy Group and the Clean Energy States Alliance. We will be sending you a copy of the webinar recording via email, and keep an eye out for upcoming webinars. We always have several in the works. So we hope to see you at a future webinar, and thank you again for joining us.